The stars looked cold and endless outside the window of the transport shuttle. Thomas Hale pressed his forehead against the glass, watching the streaks of light blur as the ship entered the Vinari system. He wasn't a soldier, not an ambassador, not even anyone important. He was just a maintenance worker, a human janitor with grease-stained hands and a broken wristwatch he refused to throw away. Yet somehow he had been assigned to the royal palace of Queen Sarathis herself, ruler of one of the most powerful alien empires in the galaxy. When the shuttle landed, the airlock hissed open with a high-pitched tone, and the scent of metal and ozone filled his lungs. The Vinari homeworld was unlike anything he'd seen before. The sky shimmered with a faint purple hue, and the buildings rose like crystal spires reaching for heaven. Each structure reflected light in 100 directions, making it hard to tell what was real and what was illusion. Even the ground beneath his boots felt strange, smooth, almost alive, humming with energy. Thomas adjusted the small device behind his ear, a transling, the universal translator chip provided by the Galactic Council. It was his only bridge between his voice and theirs. Without it, he'd be just another silent primitive in a world of gods. He looked around nervously as two tall Vinari guards approached. Their bodies glowed faintly under their translucent skin, veins of blue light pulsing like rivers of energy. One of them, his voice deep and melodic, said something that the translator turned into. "Human Unit 427B, follow. You will serve within the lower maintenance wings." Thomas nodded quickly, clutching his toolkit like a lifeline. He wasn't here to make friends or stand out. All he wanted was to do his job, stay out of trouble, and get back home with enough credits to pay off his sister's medical bills on Earth. Simple plan. Quiet life. No drama. The palace, however, didn't believe in simplicity. Every corridor shimmered with living light. Walls shifted color based on emotion. The floor resonated softly when he walked, reading his steps, his heart rate, even his mood. The Vinari were a species of grace and control, elegant, logical, and proud. And among them, Queen Sarathis was considered divine. Thomas had seen her once on the holoscreen. Her silver skin shimmered like moonlight, her long hair flowed like liquid glass, and her golden eyes seemed to see through souls. The way people bowed when she passed, it wasn't out of fear alone. It was awe, worship. He could never imagine speaking to her. In fact, humans were rarely allowed near the throne chamber at all. Most worked in the outer palace, repairing energy conduits, scrubbing filters, or maintaining the environmental systems. That was exactly where Thomas wanted to stay, unseen, unheard, and safe. But life, especially human life, had a way of breaking the rules. On his third day at the palace, he was fixing a coolant pipe deep in the lower levels. The air was cold, his breath visible as he muttered to himself, tightening a valve. His translator kept glitching, random static in his ear, words repeating twice or sometimes not at all. "Piece of junk," he whispered, tapping the side of his head. He didn't know that the chip was more than just misfiring. It was dying. Above him, the alarm lights flickered. A soft tone echoed through the halls, the sound used to signal royal movement. Somewhere high above, the queen herself was entering the throne chamber. Thomas didn't think much of it until the guards arrived. "Human, the queen demands your presence," one of them said. Thomas froze mid-turn. "What, me?" The guard didn't blink. "You, bring your tools." His heart started pounding. He wiped his hands on his jumpsuit, smearing black grease on the fabric. This had to be a mistake. What would the queen want with a maintenance worker? But he had no choice. He followed them through towering corridors of glass and light, past alien murals that seemed to move when he blinked. His boots echoed faintly, swallowed by the immense silence of the palace. When the golden doors of the throne room opened, he felt like an insect entering a cathedral. Queen Sarathis sat high upon a crystalline seat that shimmered with power. Her gaze turned toward him, curious, unreadable. Thomas swallowed hard, his palms sweating. He didn't know that in the next few seconds, one broken translator would change both their lives forever. Thomas's heart beat like thunder in his chest as he stepped into the throne chamber. The air itself seemed to hum with power. The room was enormous. Walls of glass crystal that shifted colors like a living rainbow, pillars glowing with slow-moving energy, and the scent of burning incense that reminded him of rain and metal. At the far end, Upon a throne carved from what looked like pure diamond sat Queen Sarathis. Her presence filled the room like gravity. She wasn't just beautiful, she was otherworldly. Her skin shimmered like silver under starlight, and her long flowing hair sparkled with traces of blue fire. Her golden eyes glowed faintly as she watched the human approach. Thomas had seen her in holovids, but seeing her in person made his knees weak. She wasn't just a ruler. She was something sacred. Around her, dozens of alien attendants stood in silence, their glowing eyes following his every step. He felt smaller than dust. The guard beside him spoke first, his deep voice echoing through the hall. "Your Majesty, this is the human maintenance worker who fixed the coolant valves in the lower sectors. The malfunction was severe. Without his repairs, your chambers would have overheated." Thomas blinked in surprise. "That's why she called me here?" The Queen tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "So this human prevented a systems failure?" "Yes, Your Majesty," the guard confirmed. Her eyes turned toward him again, sharp and glowing. "Step forward, human." Thomas's throat went dry. His boots scraped the crystal floor as he took a few hesitant steps closer. Every sound echoed in the grand silence. He bowed awkwardly. He didn't even know if that was the right gesture for her kind. "It was nothing, Your Majesty," he said softly, his voice shaking. "Just doing my job." The translator chip buzzed faintly in his ear, processing his words. For a moment it worked fine. The Queen's golden eyes softened just a little.
"Humility," she said.
"Rare among the younger races." He let out a tiny breath of relief. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad, but then, a spark. A glitch. The translator in his ear flickered, giving off a tiny shock. He winced but tried to keep speaking. "Your Radiance, it was an honor to serve in your presence. Your throne chamber is magnificent." That's what he thought he said. But the translator stuttered, skipped a few words, and twisted his speech into something entirely different. What came out in Venari language was, "Your Radiance, it was an honor to serve in your presence. Your backside is magnificent." For one horrible second, Thomas didn't understand why the room had gone silent. The guards stiffened instantly. Their glowing eyes narrowed and weapons hissed to life. The attendants gasped softly, murmuring in their native tongue. The sound spread like ripples in water. Disbelief, shock, offense. Thomas looked around, confused. What did I? Then he saw the Queen's face. Her golden eyes widened slightly, not with anger, but surprise. Her lips parted as if she was trying to decide what to say. The nearest guard snarled something, stepping forward, weapon drawn. "He insults Her Majesty." Thomas panicked. "Wait, no. I didn't mean that." The translator's broken. He raised his hands, his voice cracking. "I swear I didn't say anything rude." The translator made a faint buzzing noise and repeated rude as royal. Thomas wanted to cry. The guards were ready to strike. One even pressed the tip of a glowing spear against his neck. He could feel its heat. Then the Queen raised her hand. Instantly silence fell. Every weapon was lowered, every movement stopped. The tension in the air was so sharp it hurt. Thomas looked up at her, terrified. He had no idea if she was about to order his execution. His knees trembled so much he thought he might collapse, but then, out of nowhere, she smiled. It started small, a tiny, graceful curve of her lips. Then it grew into soft, melodic laughter. It was like music echoing off the crystal walls, warm and strange and beautiful. The guards looked shocked. The attendants froze. No one had ever heard their queen laugh like that, especially not because of a human. When she finally spoke, her voice carried both amusement and curiosity. "So, you think my backside is magnificent?" Thomas's face turned scarlet. "No, I mean yes." "I mean no. I didn't mean that." The translator, "It's broken. I swear." Her golden eyes sparkled like suns. "Broken or not, your words are bold." He wanted the floor to swallow him whole, but she only waved her hand. "Lower your weapons. This human will not be punished." Thomas exhaled shakily, feeling the strength leave his legs. The guards obeyed, though they looked confused and angry. As she rose from her throne, her silver gown caught the light. She walked closer to him, her gaze steady and strange. "I find you amusing, little human," she said quietly. "You are the first in 1,000 years to speak to me without fear." Thomas could only stare, speechless, as her laughter echoed one more time, a sound that would follow him for the rest of his life. After the laughter faded, Thomas could barely move. He stood frozen in the throne chamber, hands shaking, stomach twisting with fear and embarrassment. The room felt impossibly vast, every crystal surface reflecting his shame like hundreds of tiny mirrors. He had survived the initial panic, but now he faced something worse. The silence after a storm. The guards lingered around him, uneasy. Even they seemed unsure how to behave. None of them had ever witnessed their queen laugh at a human, especially not in response to what could have been the gravest insult imaginable. In Vinari culture, words were sacred. To speak rudely to a ruler could mean instant execution. Yet here he was, alive, trembling like a frightened child before a goddess. Thomas swallowed hard and tried to speak, but the words came out as a faint mumble. I swear, Your Majesty, it was not what I meant. The translator, the queen, held up a hand, graceful and commanding, stopping him mid-sentence. Her golden eyes studied him intently, curious and unhurried, as if she were weighing his very soul. You fear for your life, little human, she said softly. The translator rendered her tone in hesitant, melodic words. And yet you do not flee. Why? Thomas's mind raced. Why would I flee? He thought. I barely understand this world, I barely understand her, and yet... Why should I run? I don't know, he admitted, voice shaking. I didn't want to... The translator sputtered again, misfiring, turning his words into something strange and clumsy. He froze, terrified. Another mistake could cost him his life. The queen's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, not in anger but in focus. Do you speak without thought or... With courage? She asked, her voice soft but piercing. Humans, they are unpredictable creatures. I do not yet understand you. Thomas's heart pounded. This was no time for a joke. He had always imagined that meeting a queen would involve bowing, whispering polite words, and being dismissed without notice. But here in the heart of the Vinari Empire he was being examined like an open book, every fear and hesitation visible. He swallowed, trying to steady himself. I am just a human. I fix things. I try to help. Her eyes softened slightly at his words. She tilted her head, the light catching her silver hair, making it glow like liquid metal. You help? Without thought of reward? She asked. Yes, Thomas whispered, almost inaudibly. I only try to do what is right. I don't know if it matters, but I try. The queen's gaze lingered on him, warm and strange, like she was seeing something beyond the surface. She stepped closer, and the crystal floor resonated softly with each of her movements. Thomas's knees weakened again. His mind screamed at him to apologize, to bow, to explain everything, but the words failed him. Then something unexpected happened. She laughed again, soft, melodic, gentle this time. It wasn't cruel. It wasn't mocking. It was genuine. Her amusement wrapped around him like a warm blanket, and Thomas felt for the first time in his life a strange sense of relief. You fear, yet you are honest, she said, her voice calm, almost tender. You stand before me and do not lie. You do not pretend to be grand or clever. Most would cower or try to manipulate me. You do neither. Thomas could barely speak. I don't know how to... Silence is better than lies, she interrupted softly. And you, human, are not a liar. For a long moment, Thomas just breathed, feeling the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. The guards lowered their weapons completely, looking at him with confusion and awe. Thomas realized that he had survived not because he had pleased her with words, or because he was clever, or because he was brave in the traditional sense. He had survived because he had been genuine. The queen studied him a little longer, then nodded ever so slightly. Perhaps humans are worth studying, she murmured. Even the smallest, most insignificant among you. Have courage. Thomas felt a strange swell of emotion, relief, disbelief, and an odd sense of pride. He was just a maintenance worker, a janitor, a nobody from Earth, and yet here he was, standing alive before a being who could have ended him in a heartbeat, and instead, she was talking to him. He realized that survival sometimes didn't come from skill, strength, or cunning. Sometimes it came from honesty, from being exactly who you were, even when every instinct told you to hide. For the first time since arriving on this alien world, Thomas dared to breathe deeply, allowing a faint, shaky smile to appear on his face. He had lived through the scariest moment of his life, and against all odds he was still here. And somehow, he thought, he had made the queen laugh. After that first terrifying encounter, Thomas expected to be ignored or sent back to the lower levels of the palace. He thought the Queen would forget him, or worse, consider him a foolish human to be kept at a distance. But the next morning the unexpected happened. He was summoned again. He stepped into the throne chamber, heart hammering. This time the room felt less threatening, though still awe-inspiring. The crystal walls shimmered softly, reflecting the rising sun outside, painting the entire hall in shades of violet and gold. Queen Sarathis sat upon her throne as if waiting for him, her golden eyes calm and curious rather than judgmental. "Step forward, human," she said. The translator rendered her words smoothly without glitches. Thomas obeyed, wiping his hands nervously on his jumpsuit. "Yes, Your Majesty," he stammered, careful not to speak too fast. She studied him silently for a moment, then leaned slightly forward, resting her hands on the crystalline armrests. "Tell me," she said softly, "why do humans laugh even when life is difficult?" Thomas blinked, surprised. No human had ever been asked such a question by a ruler of an empire that spanned light years. He hesitated, trying to find the right words. I think laughter. It helps us keep going, even when things are bad, even when we are scared. It's hope, maybe, or a way to survive." The Queen tilted her head slightly, the light catching her silver hair so that it seemed to flow like liquid light. "Hope, interesting. Humans use something as small as laughter to defy danger?" "Yes," Thomas said, gaining a little confidence. "Even small things matter. A smile, a joke, a kind word. They make a difference even if it's tiny." Queen Sarathis remained silent for a moment as if processing his words. Then she asked another question. "And why do you fix things that are broken, even when you receive no reward?" Thomas looked down at his hands, the skin rough and stained from hours of work. "Because if I don't, someone else will suffer. I don't always get credit. I don't always get thanked. But I know that something will work again. That's enough for me." The Queen's golden eyes seemed to glow brighter. "Humans are strange creatures. Most beings seek power or honor or wealth. You do not." Thomas shrugged, unsure how to respond. "I guess. I just try to do what I think is right. Even if it's small, even if no one notices, it matters." For the first time, Thomas noticed a faint smile on her lips, gentle and almost human. She leaned closer, her presence overwhelming yet strangely comforting. "And yet," she said, voice soft, almost teasing, "you risked your life speaking to me, a creature you barely understand. Bold or foolish?" Thomas swallowed. "Maybe both, Your Majesty. I didn't mean to be bold, I just told the truth." Her laughter rang out, soft, melodic, not mocking, but warm. Thomas felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He had survived the first encounter with honesty. Now something different was happening. She wasn't angry. She wasn't cruel, she was curious. "Tell me, human," she said quietly, leaning forward. "What do you fear most?" Thomas hesitated. It was hard to explain human fear in a language designed to translate words, not emotion. I fear failing the people I care about, losing them. I fear not being enough when it matters." The Queen nodded slowly, as if understanding more than the words could convey. "A curious emotion, powerful in its simplicity. You fear for others, yet you risk yourself for them." Thomas's chest tightened. No ruler he had ever met had ever spoken to him this way. Not on Earth, not in any human world he had known. He felt something strange and fragile stirring inside him. Respect, awe, and a faint spark of pride. Over the next hour, the Queen asked more questions, and Thomas answered as honestly as he could. Sometimes the translator faltered, misfiring words, but she didn't scold him. She only smiled, sometimes laughed, and listened intently. He found himself speaking about his childhood, his family on Earth, and the reasons he became a maintenance worker, a human who fixed what others ignored. By the time the session ended, Thomas felt exhausted yet strangely connected. He had been terrified moments ago, sure that one wrong word would cost him his life. But now he realized that the Queen was not just a ruler, she was a being capable of understanding, capable of curiosity, capable of seeing value in the smallest, most ordinary human. As he bowed to leave, he dared to glance at her again. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said, voice soft but sincere. Her golden eyes met his, and for a moment, the fear and distance melted away. "Perhaps human," she said. There is more to your kind than I first believed. Thomas left the throne chamber that day with a heart that felt lighter, and a mind racing with the impossible thought that the queen of the Vinari Empire, the being who could have ended him with a single command, was beginning to see him as someone worth noticing. The peace of the Vinari palace didn't last long. One quiet night, alarm shattered the calm, echoing through the crystal corridors with a terrifying wail. Thomas jolted awake in the maintenance quarters, toolkit in hand, as red lights flashed around him. The palace was under attack. Rebels had breached the outer defenses, seeking to overthrow Queen Sarathis. Explosions shook the floors, and the hum of energy shields filled the air. The normally serene palace had become a chaotic storm of sound and light. Thomas's heart raced. He had never imagined being part of something this dangerous. He wasn't a soldier, just a janitor, a fixer, a human who had spoken foolishly to a queen. But when he thought of the queen, alone in her throne chamber, fear transformed into resolve. He couldn't leave her to the mercy of attackers, not after all she had done, not after she had spared his life, laughed at his mistakes, and shown him curiosity instead of cruelty. Thomas sprinted through the corridors, dodging falling debris and shards of crystal. Sparks flew from damaged panels as he passed, and he ducked instinctively when a burst of plasma seared the wall beside him. Each step brought him closer to the throne room, to the queen. When he arrived, chaos reigned. Guards fought bravely, their glowing spears clashing with the rebels' weapons. The queen was pinned beneath a fallen support beam, her silver hair spilling across the glowing floor. Her armor had a few cracks, but she was alive. Barely. "Your Majesty," Thomas yelled, sprinting to her side. His hands grabbed the beam, straining against its weight. Muscles burned, sweat stung his eyes, but he refused to let go. The translators buzzed nervously in his ears, but he ignored them. He had only one goal: free her. The queen's golden eyes met his, wide with surprise. "Human," she whispered, but her voice was calm, even under the chaos. "Hang on," Thomas gritted his teeth. With one final heave, he lifted the beam just enough for her to roll out from under it. Bruised, shaken, but alive. She scrambled to her feet, her eyes scanning him with an intensity he had never seen before. "Why?" she asked, breathless. "You risked yourself for me?" Thomas wiped sweat from his forehead. "Because I couldn't let them hurt you. I don't care who I am or what I've done wrong. You saved me once. Now it's my turn." She studied him, her golden gaze softening. "Courage, it is rare, and yet, human, you have it in abundance." They had no time for sentiment. Explosions rocked the palace, throwing debris in every direction. Thomas grabbed a nearby energy conduit and began rerouting the power to the shields, stabilizing the walls where they were weakest. Sparks flew and arcs of electricity danced dangerously close to him, but he ignored the fear gnawing at his gut. The queen followed him, issuing orders to the surviving guards. Together they created a narrow corridor for evacuation, her trust in him evident in the way she stayed close despite the danger. At one point, a rebel soldier lunged at the queen with a blade of pure energy. Thomas didn't think. He jumped in front of her, catching the strike with a metal panel from a nearby control console. The force slammed him to the ground. Wind knocked out of him, but he shielded her. The queen reached out, grabbing his arm, steadying him. "Human, foolish, and brave," she said, a hint of a smile in her voice. By the time reinforcements arrived, the rebels were pushed back. The palace had survived, though battered and smoking. Guards and attendants moved quickly, securing the queen and repairing systems. Thomas slumped against a wall, exhausted, his uniform torn, hands scorched, but alive. Queen Sarathis approached him, her footsteps light on the crystal floor. She reached out, resting her hand lightly on his shoulder. "You saved more than me tonight," she said quietly. "You reminded everyone here that courage is not measured by size, strength, or skill. Even the smallest, most ordinary being can change the course of events." Thomas swallowed hard, emotion choking him. He had only tried to do what was right. He hadn't thought of heroism, or recognition, or even survival. He had acted on instinct, guided by a simple human truth: protect those who cannot protect themselves, and in doing so, he had survived a night that would have claimed the lives of the most powerful in the Empire, simply by being human. The palace had quieted after the attack, but the damage was clear. Crystal shards littered the corridors and energy conduits flickered weakly. Thomas moved slowly, exhaustion weighing down every step, but he stayed close to the Queen. She no longer regarded him with suspicion or amusement alone. Now there was something different in her gaze, respect, and something softer, almost human. "You should rest," she said quietly, her voice carrying over the hum of the recovering palace. "Your hands are burned, your uniform torn. Even a human deserves care." Thomas shook his head. "I can't, Your Majesty. The systems, they're still unstable. I need to help." Her golden eyes softened. "You are persistent, little human, and reckless, but I admire both." He offered a weak smile, unsure how to respond. She had laughed at him once, spared him another time, and now she seemed to trust him. That trust felt heavier than any weapon. Over the next few days, Thomas found himself working alongside the Queen. Not as a servant, not as a janitor, but as someone she deliberately allowed near her. Sometimes she asked questions about Earth, about humans, and about him. Other times she simply watched, listening to his explanations about machinery or repairs, curious about the smallest things that humans considered normal. One evening, after the palace lights dimmed to a soft glow, she called him to the throne chamber. "You stayed through the attack," she said. "Not all humans would have risked their lives for someone like me." "Why?" Thomas paused. He had spent years following orders, fixing broken things, living quietly. But he had never faced this question. "Because I could," he said finally. "Because you spared my life before. You saw me as more than nothing, and I wanted to do the same for you." Her eyes glimmered with surprise. "You act without expectation of reward, yet with intention. Humans are unlike anything I imagined." Thomas felt his heart tighten. The Queen, who could have destroyed him with a gesture, was acknowledging him in ways that few could. I'm not special," he said softly. "I just try to do right when I can." "You are more than you know," she replied. "Even a human, fragile in body, can have courage stronger than many who wield weapons." It was then Thomas realized something he hadn't felt before. The Queen wasn't merely a ruler or an authority figure. She was a being capable of understanding, capable of seeing the value in honesty and kindness and courage that came from the heart rather than the body. And somehow, she saw that in him. Days passed and a quiet bond formed between them. Sometimes it was in shared laughter, the kind that shook the chamber but carried no mockery. Sometimes it was in silence, each working in the palace while feeling connected by something unspoken. He would explain the quirks of human life, the small things that made Earth beautiful to him, the taste of fresh bread, the smell of rain on dry soil, the way a song could move a heart. She listened, fascinated, as if each story opened a new world inside her mind. One afternoon, while repairing a damaged energy conduit near her throne, Thomas accidentally sparked a minor short circuit. He yelped, dropping his tools, expecting anger or punishment. But the Queen only laughed, soft, melodic, and comforting. "Your mistakes are human," she said, her golden eyes sparkling. "They remind me that life is imperfect and that is beautiful." Thomas laughed nervously. I'll try not to break anything else, Your Majesty." She shook her head, smiling. "No, you will break things. And I will watch, and we will both learn from it." For the first time, Thomas felt he belonged somewhere beyond Earth, beyond the limits of his simple life. In the palace beside the Queen, he had found a purpose that mattered, not for fame, not for reward, but because it was right. And in return, he had her trust, her curiosity, and, unexpectedly, her friendship. That night, as he rested in the maintenance quarters, Thomas thought about how far he had come. Just days ago, he had been terrified, thinking a compliment gone wrong would end his life. Now he felt a deep, strange connection with one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. It wasn't love and it wasn't fear. It was trust, respect, and understanding, something he had never known could exist between a human and a queen. And he knew with a certainty that filled his chest, that no matter what challenges awaited, he would face them, not as a janitor, not as a nobody, but as a human who had earned a place beside the Queen. Weeks passed since the attack, and the palace slowly returned to its shining, ordered state. The halls gleamed under the soft light, the crystal walls reflecting hope rather than chaos. But for Thomas, nothing would ever be quite the same again. He had survived a near-death experience, earned the Queen's trust, and discovered a place in a world far beyond his own. Queen Sirathis summoned him one morning to the throne chamber. The light in the room shimmered gently, reflecting off her silver hair and the crystal pillars. Thomas approached carefully, his boots echoing softly. He had grown used to her presence, but his respect and awe never waned. "You have done much for me, human," she said, her golden eyes watching him with intensity. "You risked your life during the attack, spoke honestly when most would have lied, and stayed true to yourself when it would have been easier to run. You are extraordinary." Thomas swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her words. He had never considered himself extraordinary. He had only tried to do what was right. I just did what anyone would do, Your Majesty," he said, voice humble. "I wanted to help. That's all." She shook her head slightly, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Few would have acted as you did. Courage is rare even among the strongest warriors, and you are only human." He felt a warmth spread through his chest at her words. Being human had always seemed like a limitation, fragile, small, weak. And yet in her eyes it had become something remarkable. The Queen stepped closer, her presence overwhelming yet comforting. "I wish to give you something," she said softly. "Not a title, not a reward that can be taken, but recognition of your spirit." She pressed her palm lightly to his chest, a Venari gesture of deep respect. Thomas felt a strange warmth flow from her touch, a connection that seemed to transcend words or culture. "You have changed how I see humans," she continued. "Your honesty, your courage, your willingness to act without thought of glory. It is rare, and it matters. Remember this, your heart is what defines you, not your size, strength, or rank." Thomas's eyes blurred with emotion. He wanted to speak, to say something worthy of her words, but no words seemed enough. All he could do was nod, feeling the deepest sense of pride and humility simultaneously. For a long moment, they stood in silence, connected by something neither had fully named. The Queen, the ruler of a powerful empire, and Thomas, a simple human janitor, bound together by courage, honesty, and understanding. Finally, she stepped back, her expression softening. "You may return to your duties, Thomas of Earth, but know this, you are no longer merely a worker here. You are a friend, a being I trust and respect." Thomas bowed deeply, heart pounding, overwhelmed by the enormity of what she had said. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he whispered, voice thick with emotion. I will not forget this." As he left the throne chamber, he felt the weight of the palace around him, but it no longer pressed down with fear. It lifted him, reminding him of the courage he had found within himself, the respect he had earned, and the bond that had grown between him and the Queen. He returned to the maintenance wings, tools in hand, but with a new sense of purpose. Every repair, every conduit, every flickering light became more than a task. It became a way to honor the trust and friendship he had been given. And in the quiet moments he would think of the Queen, her laughter, her golden eyes, and the improbable bond that had changed his life. The palace had once seemed like an impossible place for a human like him, a world of crystal towers and beings of immense power. Now it felt like a home, not because he was strong or skilled or clever, but because he had been true to himself. In the end, Thomas realized that courage was not about facing enemies or surviving attacks. Courage was about honesty, kindness, and the willingness to stand tall, even when the universe expected you to bow. And that courage, his human heart, had not only saved his life, but had earned the respect and friendship of one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. As he looked back at the throne chamber one last time before returning to his duties, he smiled. The Queen had once laughed at a mistake, spared his life, and now she had accepted him as something more than a human worker. She had accepted him as a friend, and for Thomas that was more valuable than any reward the universe could offer.